Hello, all of my lovely art students. This week we are going over the element of art space, and we are using our first name to create art that explores the difference between positive and negative space. I know the art you are currently looking at looks as though it's extremely complicated and might take a lot of time, but you will see in this video, these are actually pretty simple patterns to create using basic lines and shapes, but we will get more into that as the video goes. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. For this project, we are talking about the element of art, space. And the definition of space in art is actually pretty simple and straightforward. All it is the area above, below, within, and around an object or objects in your art. So because space is the area above, below, within, and around an object, literally that means everything in your art is space, everything. So that makes it a little difficult to talk about space if I was just like, wow, nice space in your art, or maybe you need to fix the space in your art. You're gonna be like, I don't know what you're talking about, it's all space. So to help us, we separate space into two different groups. We separate it into positive space and negative space. So I'm going to start by giving you the definition of what these two things are. Positive space is the space an object takes up. And since positive space is the space an object takes up, negative space is the opposite. It's the empty space around an object or objects in your art. I'm going to just draw a little picture right here. A pretty simple flower, pretty straightforward. And I kept it to just black and white, so that way it's pretty easy to tell what the positive space is and what the negative space is. And I want you to take a second and see if you can figure out which is which. Which one's is the black space positive space or is it negative space? What about the white space? Is it positive space or a negative space? And the answer is that the white space is the negative space. And the black space is the positive space. Because if you didn't quite catch on, the black space is the flower and the leaves, and flowers and leaves take up space. When I explain this to first and second grade when we're going over positive and negative space, I say it's the space you can touch. It's like your space that's actually there. And then the white space is the negative space because it's all the empty space around the flower. Nothing's in it, it's just empty. You can, if you wanna kind of picture it in your head, you could say like, oh, well, it's the air around me. Technically, air takes up space, yes, but visually, it does not. We don't actually see it. So hopefully that helps a little bit. So our project is going to be exploring the difference between positive space and negative space. And that being said, we are going to go ahead and get started. For this project, we are going to be drawing our first name in block letters. And I am going to show you my technique for drawing block letters. If you are in 5th grade and watching this video, then you've actually already seen this when we did our color wheel project, so feel free to skip ahead or continue watching if you need a refresher on this technique. So I'm going to start by just writing my first name across my paper in pencil. And you're going to want to use pencil because this is going to get erased eventually. And my first name's Emma. Oh my goodness, you know my first name now, though you probably should have already known it from EdSP, but I'm just gonna write it across my paper like this, nice and big. So this is helpful also just for planning out how much space your letters are going to take up, so you can make sure that your name actually fits on the paper, so you're not getting to your last letter and having to squeeze it in super tiny into the corner kind of thing. And if you have a really long name, because my name's only 4 letters, it's pretty short, then you have a couple choices. You can fit it all on to one row. That is fine. Like if you have the name Jacqueline, Jacqueline's a pretty long name. You can cram all your letters in. Or you can choose to stack your letters into 2 rows. So for example, we'll keep using Jacqueline. You can, if I know there's multiple spellings, but you could do it where it's on one row you have Jaqu, and then underneath you have the rest of the letters, which is what, Line. I think I spelled that right, but it's up to you how you want to do it. So this next step, again, you want to still do it in pencil because again, these lines are going to get erased. That is super important. Do not use marker or crayon or color pencil or anything for this next step. So what I want to do is I want to draw my block letters. I am basically using these lines as a guide for my block letter lines. So I'm kind of like outlining, and if that doesn't make sense, that's okay. I'm about to show you. So I'm going to start with my E, and I'm going to follow this line right here with another line like that. And I'm just going to go around that E that I originally drew. And then I would erase the E that I drew on the inside. So you can see I went in and fixed up some things. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to both of my M's, just following along these lines that I originally drew for those letters. So I've already moved on to my A, I wasn't thinking about it, but I'm going to start my A by doing what I've done for the E and the M's, and then I'm going to talk about the hole in the middle. So with any letter that has a hole or a cutout in the middle, what you do is pretty much the same thing. I just need to come into this hole and then just follow along the lines. See? Pretty straightforward. And then I go in and I erase the lines just like I did for my E. So like I kind of mentioned earlier, these lines are actually going to get erased eventually for our project, but for now we're keeping them because we need to know the boundaries of our letters, and that'll make more sense again as we continue. What I want to do now is I kind of want to divide up the space around my letters. Just, it's up to you how you want to do it. You can just do it with a bunch of like straight lines going like this across your paper. I am going to just kind of add some just random curved lines like this. I want to make sure to not draw through my letter. That is super important. I do not want these lines to go through my letters. And just like all the other pencil lines, these also will probably get erased. So it's kind of random. I didn't really think too hard about it. I just kind of divided it up so they were kind of equal in size. There are some areas that are larger than others. And I made sure that there was at least 5 of them. I have a little more, but make sure you have at least 5. And now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about why we did this. So we talked about positive and negative space. And normally if we were to do this, you would think that our name would be the positive space. It would be the space that takes up space. But we're going to kind of do the opposite of what we would expect. And we're actually going to be making our name be the negative space. And we're going to be filling our background behind our name with all of the positive space. And our positive space is going to be what we call Zentangles. What Zentangles are a kind of form of relaxing, meditative drawing of patterns. And to kind of break down what that means is basically you're drawing patterns. So that's pretty simple. But whereas we normally plan out our art and kind of think about what we're trying to draw ahead of time, Zentangles are patterns where you kind of just go with it. You just make it up as you go along, and you use your simple lines and your simple shapes, and then you just keep adding and adding and adding until they turn into these complex and beautiful patterns. That might not make a lot of sense, and that is fine. I am going to show you what I mean as I go. But you're going to draw a different Zentangle or a different pattern in each of these spaces that you drew. And as you draw, if you want to create more spaces and more patterns than the amount of space that you've divided, that is fine. And we traditionally do this with just a black marker, all right? If you don't have a black marker, that's fine. You can use a pencil, you can use something else, but Zentangles are normally done with black marker. And I'm just gonna move that out of the way and pick a space to start with. I'm just going to start in this corner right here because that is simple and in small enough space. And as I'm doing this, I want to make sure to not draw inside of my block letter. And I'm just going to start with a simple shape. I'm not even going to think about it, just circle. And I'm going to repeat that circle inside this space right here. Not completely neat, not completely what I was going for, but that's okay. That's kind of the point of Zentangles, is like you just kind of go with it and you accept your mistakes and you figure out how to incorporate them into your design. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it just another simple, I'm going to draw a circle inside my circle. Then from there, I can just kind of decide, you know what, I'm going to draw like kind of like just using a bunch of ovals, almost like a flower shape, like this. And I want to go in and I want to color the space around it black. And you see I went and added dots because that's kind of the point again of Zentangles, is to be a little spontaneous, to like kind of zone out while you're drawing and just go with whatever you are thinking about at the moment. So that's one pattern done. Then I can come over here and, or you know what, I think I'll do this little space right here. And they don't have to always be as complicated as this. Maybe I just want to do a curved line like this. And then inside that curved line, I'm just going to do more curved lines like this. And I can leave it like that, that's fine. If I want to go in and add an extra detail, an extra line, I can as well if I want to make it look a little more detailed. So you can see it's just simple lines that you just add together to make something look a little more elaborate. And I'm just going to go in into each of these spaces and add kind of my own, my own pattern in Zentangle as I like zone out. I just want to pause for a second in case you're looking at this and you are still overwhelmed. I just want to once again emphasize that I am using super simple lines and occasionally shapes to make these. All I did for this one is I did a giant zigzag line and then I started filling it in with just basic straight lines. So I did diagonal lines going one direction, then diagonal lines going the opposite direction. Then I just did horizontal lines to connect the two. That's it. It just looks more complicated than it actually is. Over here, I'm still figuring out what I'm doing, but all I did was do a bunch of curved lines, and then I started connecting those curved lines with curved lines that were perpendicular, and then doing it opposite directions on which direction they're curved in. So again, simple stuff. We just start to combine the simple stuff together to start to make it look a lot more complicated than it actually is. So my Zentangles are finished, and now what I am choosing to do is I'm taking my eraser and just erasing any leftover pencil lines. That is my project. My name is created out of negative space, since technically that space is empty. Our next project next week will go more into how we better define what positive and negative space is. So that being said, just once again, do not stress out about like these Zentangles. They're supposed to be kind of just you come up with them spontaneously as you draw. If you make mistakes, trust me, there are actually a lot of mistakes in my Zentangles where my pattern, I didn't actually follow the pattern because I just made a mistake and then kind of just went with it. But because it is so busy, it's a lot more difficult to pick up on what that mistake is. So you can follow along with what Zentangles I chose to do, come up with your own. Feel free to Google what Zentangles are. There are so many different artists who have already come up with like a large library of different patterns that they have drawn. So that being said, again, I really look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. Until next week.